Rebels of the Sherpa Illusion. Normally I start off this podcast by saying hi, but I'm going to start this one off by saying hydration. We know how important hydration is for our bodies. It's the thing that keeps us running, right? You want to be a well-oiled machine. You want to be running efficiently. You know what can help you run efficiently? Liquid IV. It is the category-winning hydration brand fueling your well-being, and the hydration multiplier is the one product that you are missing in your daily routine. It comes in a little stick that's a powder, and in just one stick, you get 5 essential vitamins and 2 times faster hydration than water alone. If you use it first thing in the morning, maybe before a workout, when you feel run down, maybe after a long night out and doing a little partying, you know what I mean? And even, what if you have like a long flight or something like that and you just, bleh, right? We all feel that way, bleh. So add this to your water, and that convenient packaging can go with you anywhere you go, even if you're going to the gym or you're traveling or you're at work and maybe you didn't have a great breakfast. At least it's something that will fuel you up in the morning, and there's a whole bunch of flavors that are available, like sea berry, strawberry lemonade, Concord grape, lemon lime, pina colada, tropical punch, watermelon, strawberry, passion fruit, guava, acai berry. Did I say that right? I never know how to say that. But those are just some of the flavors. Here's some statistics for you folks. 1 stick of liquid IV in 16 ounces of water contains 5 essential vitamins: B3, B5, B6, B12, and even vitamin C. And we all know how important those B vitamins are. It's got 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks. It's made with premium ingredients. It's non-GMO, and it is free from gluten, dairy, and soy. I'm going to offer you a great deal, Rebels. If you go to liquidiv.com and use offer code Sherpa, you can get 20% off of anything that you order on that site when you're shopping for some better hydration. So that's Liquid IV. Check it out at liquidiv.com. Podcast that you're listening to is being presented to you in cooperation with the SJ Network. If you're a person who'd like to appear on a podcast, contact Stephen Joyner at s-j-network.com. Let's get on with the show.
Today, on Too Many Podcasts, we finally get to talk about UFOs with Brian Dunning of the Skeptoid podcast. Brian also has a new movie out called The UFO Movie They Don't Want You to See.
I really like the reverse psychology in that movie title. It's just like saying, the Sherpa has no talent. On second thought, I'll just go see the movie.
Welcome to Too Many Podcasts, the podcast about podcasts. Now, podcasting from the Sherpa Chalet on Mount Podcastia, here's your host, Jim, the Podcast Sherpa.
Hello there, Rebels of the Sherpa Illusion. Welcome to Too Many Podcasts. It is the podcast about podcasts and so much more. Pum, 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 pum. How do you like that little musical intro? It's me, Jim, the Podcast Sherpa, singing to you very badly here from the Sherpa Studios on top of Mount Podcastia. Hello there. Now, you know what? In the 11 seasons that we've done here, you know that we all like the unexplained. You know, like, does the Loch Ness Monster exist? Are UFOs real? Why does Mario Lopez's hair color never change? And how come you have a podcast Sherpa who's done almost 300 episodes and hasn't gotten a single complaint yet? I don't know. Well, that one's probably going to be the biggest mystery of all. But I got to tell you a little story. A while back when we did Sherpa Samples, I checked out an episode called Skeptoid. Maybe you remember it. It was during the Mike Kenichi episode. And in Skeptoid, it's using science to debunk a lot of urban myths and conspiracy theories and so on and so forth. And it just so happened, as I was looking for a guest this previous week, who did I find but, yes, the host of Skeptoid himself, and he's our guest today.
Who's our guest today, Sherpa?
His name is Brian Dunning, and as I said, he's been hosting Skeptoid since 2006, and now he's got a movie out. Yes, a movie. It is called The UFO Movie They Don't Want You to See. Conspiracy theory? Possibly. And anyway, we spent a little time chatting in the Sherpa Chalet, and I got to know him a little bit, and he's a really fascinating guy. I really enjoyed the conversation that I had with him, and I think you're going to enjoy it too. But wait, was that a conspiracy? Was it a coincidence? I don't know. I just found the guy on a website, so I don't know. Let's take a listen to my conversation with Brian Dunning of Skeptoid. Hello there, Rebels. We are coming to you from the Phenomenon Room of the Sherpa Chalet. My guest today is an author of 7 books, an executive producer of 4 movies, including the most recent one that we're going to talk about, of course, the UFO movie that they don't want you to know about. And he has been the host of a podcast that we just sampled a little while back called Skeptoid, which has been around since 2006. Mr. Brian Dunning has joined us here at the Sherpa Chalet. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. It's a lot of fun to be here.
Now, my initial understanding is that you were a science writer. What exactly does a science writer do?
Well, people always ask me what I do for a living, and I had to come up with something, and that's the closest I could. A science writer typically is not a research scientist, but you read all of the papers and everything, and you write something for the public understanding. And that might go on television or a blog or a newspaper, or in my case, a podcast. So I would be the primary science writer for Skeptoid Media, which means I write all the podcasts and all of our movies and lots of stuff.
Now, and I know a lot of your podcast is really just debunking a lot of the conspiracy theories.
It's the true science, the true history behind urban legends and conspiracy theories, paranormal claims, so on and so forth, the works. All the cool, fun stuff that we all heard growing up, and we finally want to know the real truth about.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as probably someone who's done this, like, you've got like hundreds of episodes right now under your belt. What are some of the things that you see that come out in the media where you go, uh-oh, I can sense a conspiracy theory?
Well, so luckily, I'm fortunate in that Skeptoid, the main the podcast that I host every week, does not include current events.
Okay.
Because all the episodes need to be evergreen. Right. And that's partly because we're hosted by PRX, the Public Radio Exchange, and they want to be able to monetize entire catalogs of shows. So you want an episode to still be relevant if someone listens to it in 10 years. So you can talk about the Loch Ness Monster today, and that still is relevant in 10 years from now as it was 10 years ago. Or you can talk about the Mexican alien mummies that were in the news. That was so stupid that 6 months from now, nobody's even going to remember that it happened. So that wouldn't be the kind of episode that I cover. So I am relieved of the the torment that you describe of having to turn on the news and go, oh no, I'm going to have to cover this now.
Can you talk a little bit about the Mexican alien? I know that it was just very recent.
Yeah, I did a handful of TV appearances talking about that and radio. And the thing that was so stupid about it, I mean, I can say it was stupid. The mummies were stupid looking at face value. I mean, they looked horribly made, like a 10-year-old made them out of paper mache. And that's funny. But the really sad thing is that this same guy has been pulling this same hoax. He did it in 2015, he did it in 2017 and 2018 with a little bit different looking, but they were different proportions, but they were obviously the same manufacturer. But the horrible thing was he was using actual Peruvian children, mummies of actual Peruvian children that had been illegally grave robbed, like literally hired a grave robber to go out and steal some mummies for him. And he was then basically mutilating the bodies. He was cutting off the fingers to make them look like they had 3 fingers. He was removing their heads and replacing them with llama skulls, and then kind of slathering this some sort of white paste over the whole thing to hide the damage that he'd done. That is a horrible, horrible crime against archaeology and humanity and anyone who's a decent person, to mutilate the bodies of children to promote your UFO claim. So it's and the guy's he's been in the news every time he's done this. There's been plenty of newspapers articles revealing the fraud and the hoax, and yet he's still able to get people to come to his little events. And he was able to he persuaded this guy, one of the American pilots who went down there, Ryan Graves, agreed to share a stage with this guy without having done so much as a simple Google search to find out, what he's who he's on board with here.
Yeah.
It's to me, it was funny initially, but after that, it quickly became, honestly, a horror story.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a way to prove a point, and there's just going too far, and obviously this person doesn't know right from wrong when it came to doing either.
Yeah. It's unaccountable to me that. I mean, even that he didn't even make any serious change to his process or to what the bodies looked like after being caught for displaying mutilated dead children. Literally, it's the only way you can say it.
Yeah.
It's not a bright spot in the history of ufologists.
Is this the rule more than the exception, where there are people that kind of go to maybe not those kind of lengths, but to create a facade that look, this is what I found, and it's all just staged?
So I'm going to say no. It's not the rule. By and large, people are honest,
mm-hmm.
and most people who believe they've seen aliens or UFOs are honestly mistaken. And they are giving what is to them a true account of what they recall and what they perceived. And they may very well believe it very profoundly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's most ordinary UFO believers. But then you've got the people at the top of the game, the people who are producing the TV shows. They know that they're producing pure fiction.
Right.
The guys like this guy, Mosan, the Mexican guy, and all of sort of the personalities that we have in modern American ufology, who are the same names who are in the headlines each week. I believe that most of them know that much of what they're doing is fraudulent.
Mm-hmm.
We have this guy, David Grush, the quote unquote whistleblower. And he comes from a long history of friendship with all of these prominent ufologists. He didn't just come out of the military and decide to blow the whistle because he learned something. That's a completely fictitious way of presenting how he got to where he is.
Mm-hmm.
But he is someone I believe is genuine in what he talks about. I think he's extraordinarily gullible. The two cases that he gave enough information about so that we knew which cases he's talking about are cases which have been exhaustively debunked for decades. And I think he just heard about them recently. Like most people, he is inclined to believe and accept what things that he hears that agree with his pre-existing beliefs, and he's inclined to ignore or dismiss things that don't. So I think we know that he heard about one of these cases from his friend Lou Elizondo. We know he heard about the other one from Eric Davis. I don't think we know that. I think it's fairly clear, but we don't have proof of that. Who was one of the ghost hunters at the original Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, he's getting these stories from very dubious sources, and he just genuinely believes them to the point that he was willing to be made, sort of the sacrificial lamb and go up in front of Congress and tell these stories.
Now you've made a movie about UFOs, and
yes,
I guess would it be fair to ask you what is your stance on the existence of UFOs?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the existence of UFOs is a question that can be interpreted many different ways. Obviously, people see things in the sky that they don't know what it is, that are unidentified,
mm-hmm.
all day, every day, all around the world. So UFOs definitely exist. Are there any cases where we aren't able to identify what those stories were actually talking about? Yes, many of them. We have no idea what they could have been. And so we shouldn't try to say that we know what they were.
Mm-hmm.
You can also ask the question, do I believe that these are aliens visiting the Earth? Or you could ask the question that Are there aliens in the universe? Are there intelligent civilizations in the universe? And these are all different questions that have different answers.
Sure.
And when I made my movie, it's called the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See. You go to the website, the UFO.movie is the website. For everyone who's listening, go check it out. You can see the trailers and you can find where the current streaming options are. The UFO.movie. What it is, it's obviously a silly title, right? The movie They Don't Want You to See. That's kind of obviously a tongue-in-cheek joke title. And everyone asks, well, who is they? They are basically, I'm talking about the people making these TV shows, because the audience is more susceptible to accept these fictional stories if they don't understand astronomy very well. The better you understand astronomy, the less likely you are to be duped by these TV programs. And that's what the movie is. It teaches astronomy using the public interest in UFOs, which is very high right now, as a springboard. So whoever you are, whatever your feelings on UFOs, whether you think that most UFOs are hoaxes, whether you think that every UFO is aliens visiting from another planet, wherever you are on that spectrum, this movie should better inform your opinion with real science, and you will be a better believer in UFOs for it. Yeah, that's my pitch on the movie.
Okay. I saw a video of you, I guess it was called the Christmas tree problem.
The Christmas tree problem, yes.
And I think I like the way how that kind of addresses the whole belief that, could there be life coming to us from other planets, and are we there to see it, and so on. Did you want to kind of expound on that a little bit for the listeners?
Yeah, that's gotten a lot of attention. I would say that's turned out to be kind of the surprise standout moment from the movie. The Christmas tree problem is a problem that I described about 10 years ago on my podcast, actually, when I did a show called, I think it was called Are They Out There? Or Is Anyone Out There? Something like that. Answering these same questions. So basically, there are two problems with technological civilizations being able to visit each other. Two very difficult problems to solve. One of them is the distance problem, and that's the one that everyone's familiar with, right?
Sure.
We all know that it's millions of light years between planets, or thousands or hundreds, whatever it is. It's very far, and because of relativity, it's virtually impossible to get a spacecraft of any significant mass from one to the other in any kind of a reasonable time frame. That's the basic problem that everyone understands. But the other problem that most people don't even think about is the time problem. The universe is 14.5 billion years old. We've been a technological civilization for 100 years. I mean, that's not even one pixel on that screen.
Right.
And so and I'm speaking purely hypothetically here, hypothetically, there could be many, many technological civilizations out there. But just as they are spread out very far in space, they're also sprinkled out very far over the timeline. So there could be an alien civilization that we might potentially be able to reach, and vice versa, 100 light years away, but they existed 5 billion years ago. And the duration of a technological civilization is not forever. You could have a pandemic, you could have a war, you could have a planet killer asteroid, which is one of the more likely scenarios. They could be hit by a gamma ray burst. Their sun could nova or supernova. There's a lot of things that can terminate a civilization that they can't do anything about. And so we presume, this is one of the variables of the famous Drake equation. We presume that there's a certain average lifespan of a civilization. We can only guess what that might be, but pick your number. Say it's 10,000 years, okay? And I'm perfectly happy with estimates that are higher or lower. But even if they're 10,000 years is a tiny blip on a 14.5 billion year timeline. So the Christmas tree problem, the reason I call it that is if you imagine a Christmas tree that has strings of blinking lights strung throughout the tree, and each time a light blinks on, that's the lifespan of a technological civilization. So just as we can see lights all over the tree, physically in different locations in the tree, they're also all at different times. And you would need to have two lights that are right next to each other turn on at the same time and be on at the same time. And that just makes it all the less likely that two technological civilizations will ever get to meet each other in person. And for anyone who is as enthusiastic about the possibility of meeting aliens as I am, that is a terrible problem, and we really hate it. But the better we understand it, the better informed our opinion will be. So that's what I mean when I say we're teaching astronomy from the perspective of how the heck can we meet aliens? Because we all want to do that.
Sure. And I was wondering, when I was looking up your creations and stuff, you had done a movie previously, which almost kind of ties in to the whole belief about UFOs and everything, called Science Friction, where the scientists make statements to the media, but it's taken out of context or it's distorted to make the scientist appear that, well, yeah, I believe this, but in reality, it wasn't even close to what they were saying.
Yeah, Science Friction. That was a movie that needed to be made for a long time. And this is something that is a huge issue in the world of science communicators like myself. We often get edited out of context. Now, not most of the time. I don't want to misrepresent and say this happens most of the time. But it happens at all, and that's unacceptable. And what they do, you go on one of these TV shows, and they will edit your words to say whatever point the producers want to make, which is usually something inane, like, yes, scientists do think aliens built the pyramids. And did you see the movie?
No.
Okay, well, in the movie, we've got examples. We've got interviews with all of these people to whom this has happened. And one guy in particular, they literally sliced and diced his sentences to rearrange the words. And another guy, they would ask him a question that he answers yes to, and then they would film it after a question that he answers no to make him give the opposite answer of what he would actually say.
Right.
It's absolutely shocking what these TV shows just have fair license to get away with. And people need to know about it. So Science Friction was a film that was important to make.
Sure. And, when you think about it, we're especially in an age, I think even more so, where we need to really rely on the knowledge of scientists. And, where you got these scientists where their reputations are being tarnished.
Yeah.
People are going to say, well, what do they know? They said this on this TV show. Yeah.
And the reputation is tarnished among a fair piece of their cohort, of all of their colleagues. But also a lot of their colleagues know that TV shows do this, and they're just more likely to shake their head and, oh my God, what they did to poor Bill, rather than calling up Bill and saying, Bill, what the hell did you tell Nat Geo last night? That's not true.
They're all just ready to bite the bullet already, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
So, now you've done like I said, several hundred, over 800 episodes of?
Over 900 now.
900,
I think I'm working
okay.
on 904 right now.
Do you have any favorites? I know that's kind of a weird question, given that you've done so many.
I mean, people ask me that a lot. And there are a few that I always go back to. And my personal favorites don't end up often being the popular favorites. Mm-hmm. I end up liking stories that are about historical mysteries where it turns out that if you dig enough, you can solve it. One of them that I always mention is, who was the first to climb Mount Everest? And how would you answer that question? Do you recall the name of the first man to climb Mount Everest?
Was it Hillary?
Sir Edmund Hillary, yes. Yeah. And the Sherpa that went with him was Tenzing Norgay.
Right.
So Hillary and Norgay are considered the first people to climb Mount Everest.
No relation to the Sherpa, by the way.
But thank you. Thank you for clarifying. But there's another story that a guy named Mallory and his companion Irvine were the first to summit Mount Everest like 30 years before. However, they died in the attempt and never made it back. But a lot of people believe that they did make it to the summit. And so for a lot of people, that would count as the first to summit Mount Everest. Other people say, no, it doesn't count unless you make it back safely. You can bicker about that all day long.
Mhm.
The real question is, did they make it to the summit, yes or no? And we are able to solve that by going back to, we have to learn about the route that they took and about the difficult points on that route that take a long time. We have to compare that to a time of day that they were spotted with binoculars and where they were. And we have to compare that to a time that they are known to have left a particular camp. And you can put together this whole picture. And one of their ice axes was found. And how did it get to where it was found, unless they were at that point? And many of us may remember that Mallory's body was actually found, probably, I want to say 10 or 15 years ago. Mallory's body was found. He'd been killed in a fall, and his body had tumbled way down the mountain. And he had had a camera on him that they would have used to take pictures of the summit, but the camera was not found. So they're still hoping to find Irvine's body, which they may one day.
Mhm.
Likely they probably will one day. With global warming, there's less ice on Everest than ever before, and that's going to continue. So we may find Irvine's body, and we may find the camera. We may be able to get pictures of it. However, we have a firm answer to that question already. And I'm just going to tell people, if you're interested, you got to go listen to the Skeptoid podcast and search for the Mount Everest episode. That's the kind of episode that I personally really enjoy, is getting into an old story and doing a lot of deep historical and documentary research.
Mhm.
It's a short format show. It's only 10 to 15 minutes, but it takes a full week of research and writing to do each show.
Sure.
I consider myself super lucky to be able to do it for a living. It's just a blast. It really is.
The episode that I sampled for Too Many Podcasts was about the third man.
Oh, the third man. Yeah.
I never heard about that, but I was like, wow, what an interesting breakdown of this. I mean, you could kind of understand why this would happen with people. You want to talk a little bit about it? Because you can probably explain it better than I can.
Yeah, so the what do they call it? The third man effect, the third man factor.
Yeah.
There's various names for it. The claim, the hypothesis, is that people who are in extreme conditions, particularly polar explorers, and as long as we're on the subject of Mount Everest, there have been Mount Everest climbers who have reported this as well. It's called the third man, but really that just comes from one particular case where there were two people walking and they felt like they had a third person with them. Most of these accounts are from a single person, and they have a sense of a second person walking with them. So it's really the extra person syndrome more than the third man factor. So the people who have reported this happening to them have typically been kind of at the end of their rope from the points of exhaustion, hunger, cold, exposure. And that's why it tends to happen to polar explorers a lot, because they're often in those conditions.
Right.
They've still got 30 miles to walk and they're about to keel over. And they have a sense that there's another person with them. There have been cases where people got a candy bar out of their pocket and unwrapped it and turned to hand it to the person that they thought was with them before they realized, shoot, what am I doing? There's nobody with me. But they just have this sense.
Yeah.
And so that episode goes into the neurology of that, the neuroscience behind how and why that appears, how we've been able to replicate it under controlled conditions in the lab, and what we think is going on. And so it's a real thing that happens to, uncommonly, rarely to some people. And it's fascinating to learn how and why it happens. And by no means is something that we have a complete understanding for or a complete solution for. But, we're beginning to.
Now, between all of your movie making and your book writing and your podcast recording, Brian, are there any podcasts that you get the chance to listen to?
Oh, okay. Wow. So that is a great question. There's a lot of podcasts that I love. I've always told people when they ask for podcast advice or whatever, I say, to be a great content producer, you first have to be a great content consumer. Mm-hmm. You've got to listen to a lot of podcasts. You've got to listen to some bad ones so you know what to avoid. And you've got to listen to the great ones so that you know what your targets really are. And so you would think that I would listen to a lot of podcasts, and I just can't. I just never have the time. Doing I started off doing the podcast, as you mentioned, in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a hobby for the first few years, but it took over and became my full-time job. And then it incorporated, and then it became a nonprofit. And now we've got all these employees and staff and everything, and it's grown. So it turned from doing a podcast as something that I did on the side to being, one of these 60-hour-a-week jobs that I'm not only still trying to write and host the podcast, I'm the executive director of the nonprofit, and we're doing all these other projects. As you mentioned, we've published books. We've made 2 full-length feature films and 2 40-minute educational films, all of which are on streaming services and available for people to watch. There's just so much going on that I'm like busier than ever. And every time I hire someone, it's like, I need more work taken off my shoulders, so we're hiring another person. And that person ends up adding more work to manage them and work with them and work with whatever they're creating. So I don't have nearly as much time. But the podcasts that I do listen to, I will tell you, I listen to a number of NPR podcasts because we're public broadcasting ourselves.
Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful channel that you with the Moth is actually one of my favorites.
Oh yeah. And then there's 3 or 4 podcasts that friends of mine produce who are who are colleagues of mine in my same zone and everything. And if I listen to one of their episodes every 3 months, that's a great accomplishment. I wish I could listen to all of them, but I can't. So I got my friends' shows, and I've got my, the professional NPR shows that I personally enjoy for my own listening. Man, I just can't keep up, though.
Okay, I won't put you on the spot, Brian. It's okay.
Oh, you put me on the spot. Oh, you want names of podcasts?
Sure, give us names.
Sure. Okay. Sure. The NPR podcasts that I listen to are Up First, the daily news show. Mm-hmm. Wait, Don't Tell Me. Planet Money. I love Planet Money because if I had another life, I would be an economist. Radiolab, although it's so many reruns these days, I rarely listen to an episode anymore because it turns out to be a rerun. I go, oh, crap. I click fast forward to the next show. Those are the main ones. And then for friends podcasts, I listen to Monster Talk. I listen to Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. And Wait, Don't Tell Me. Oh No, Ross and Carrie. Uh-huh. These are all really good friends of mine. And then one of our board members is Jeff Wagg, who runs a van life podcast. And I'm not a van life guy, but he's a friend of mine, and I just enjoy hanging out with my friend when I can. So I listen to his show, which is called Built to Go. Those are my list. It's a long list, but I listen to all of them so infrequently that it's much shorter than it seems.
That's a great list. I think I knew about 90% of the podcasts that you just mentioned. So
sure.
Yeah, definitely some quality stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And a number of them have been around for 10 years or more.
That's right. So we have a portion of the show, and it's called Shameless Self-Promotion.
Okay.
And this is where you can let everybody know where they can get in touch with you and follow all the great things that you've created.
Shameless self-promotion. Shameless self-promotion.
Well, thank you very much. I can do that. So if everyone wants to listen to my weekly podcast, the 10-minute show on your favorite urban legends and everything, that is at Skeptoid. You can find that wherever you find your podcast. You can go to skeptoid.com, subscribe to it just like you know how to subscribe to a podcast because you're listening to this. If you want to see the UFO movie, the website for that is theufo.movie, and it is right now in the process of appearing on streaming services. So I know it's going to appear soon on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, and Tubi, but I don't know when. Might be by the time you hear this, might not yet. But there's always options to rent it or stream it at the UFO.movie. And finally, my most recent book is Conspiracies Declassified from Simon & Schuster. It's 50 famous conspiracy theories. What's the theory and what actually happened? And let's see. my Substack, if you want to get spam email from me 3 times a week, subscribe to my Substack, which is briandunning.substack.com.
Okay, there you have it, Brian Dunning, the host of Skeptoid and the executive producer of the UFO movie that they don't want you to see, but we want you to go see it, though. We're going to rebel.
We actually do. It's they who don't want you to see it.
That's right. Brian, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun. I love talking about this stuff. Thank you.
Now it's time for Sherpa Samples. If you've got a podcast you'd like us to sample, contact us, and we'll mention your name on the show.
And moving on, we get to talk about Sherpa Samples, and that's where I get to check out some of the podcasts that are creeping up and down the podcast charts. The point of this is not to necessarily review the podcasts, although I will tell you the ones that are my favorites. There's nothing wrong with that, right? It's my show. I'll do what I want. Okay, I feel better now. But just to fill you in, like if you see a title and you wonder what it's about, well, I can tell you what it's about because I've listened to so many so far. Believe it or not, I really do this. And if there is a podcast that you would like me to check out, you know what you can do. Just message me on Sherpolution on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or TikTok, and I will check out a podcast, and you will get your name mentioned on the show. You will have moments of fame. Moments of fame. Okay, let's move on to the list, shall we? Okay, so the first one I checked out was Sad Oligarchs, and that is hosted by a guy named Jake Hanrahan. And this is weird. In the last, I believe, 13 or so months with the Russian war against Ukraine that has been going on, 13 Russian billionaires have mysteriously died. And they've been saying suicides for all of them, but Jake suspects otherwise. And there are a lot of odd stories behind that. It's a limited series, very fascinating stuff. If you're into that kind of current event, spooky stuff, check it out. Worlds Beyond Number is a role-playing game. I believe there were like 3 people. It's kind of like the Dungeons and Dragons podcasts that we review, and you know that I don't really know a lot about Dungeons and Dragons, but these are folks that create new games every week, and I guess it's a running story with different characters. It's not as light as some of the other D&D podcasts, if I might add. They have their moments, but it tends to be a little more serious and a little more dramatic music. But if you are into, what's the word? RPG, right? Role-playing games, check out that podcast. Phoebe Reads a Mystery is hosted by Phoebe Judge, who actually does another podcast called Criminal. And I believe also this is Love. And in this, it's basically her, let's guess, yes, reading a mystery. So talk about a self-explanatory title. The episode that I checked out was a chapter from The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and Phoebe basically read that chapter. If you're into classic literature, this is a nice way to check some books out with someone with a very pleasant voice, and you get to hear a classic story. Heart of the Game features interviews with some of the world's greatest athletes and their families, so you get an understanding of what makes them tick. The show that I checked out, it was an interview with football player Kurt Warner and both of his sons, who I believe are both aspiring football players. I'm not sure if they play for the NFL right now. Maybe they play in college football. I don't know. But yeah, it was an interesting conversation, and it was an interesting look at what makes an athlete tick and his family, and also gives you a behind-the-scenes look at someone who maybe you didn't know that well as well. Hot Mess with Alex Earl. Alex Earl is, I believe, a TikToker. Is that the appropriate word? I think she's on TikTok or YouTube. It's one of those. She's a social media presence, and I guess she is a college graduate. I think she's in her 20s, and she talks a lot about her life and what goes on with it, and I guess all her dating stories and so on and so forth. So if you like hearing young women talk about their dating lives, Alex Earl, she's a hot mess. Check it out. A Bit Fruity with Matt Bernstein. Matt, I believe, is a member of the LGBTQ community, and but he talks about a lot of different issues. This one was about politics and the LGBTQ conservatives. But definitely an intelligent guy, and I guess they bring that, that whole LGBTQ issue into play, into the topics that they will discuss. Relatively new podcast. Let's see where it goes. All About Change with Jay Ruderman. It's conversations with people who are bringing positive change in the world. He interviewed a woman who I believe is in Thailand, and she created a rescue sanctuary for Asian elephants. So really cool stuff. She saw that they were being abused, and she created the sanctuary. So really good, positive stuff. I like it when we have positive podcasts like that. The Scathing Atheist is hosted by the guys who host God Awful Movies, which is a podcast that we've sampled before, and those are religious-themed movies that are obviously awful. But they really talk more about religion itself, and they're not big fans. And it's hosted by Noah, Heath, and Eli. But they if you're very anti-religion, I guess this is a podcast that you might want to listen to. Your Stupid Questions is a comedy podcast. It's hosted by the same guys who, believe it or not, host Small Town Murder, Jimmy and James. And this is a podcast about the comment section on different products and services. The episode that I checked out, they were talking about, about a fast food restaurant, what shall we say, a personal trimmer. And I forget what the other one was too, but some of the stuff is really funny, and they're just basically reading it and reacting on it. It's definitely good, goofy fun. It made me laugh a few times. So thanks a lot, guys. And lastly, The Illusionist. Now, not with an I, but with an A, Allusionist, and appropriately enough, about language. And it is hosted by a lady named Helen Zaltzman, who has a very pleasant voice. And actually, I think if you become one of the members of their podcast society or followers, if you send her a word that is unusual, she will record a text tone for you, which I thought was pretty cool. And the episode that I listened to was about using Navajo words as scientific terms so the Navajo people can understand medical speak. So it was definitely an interesting episode. I know there's a lot of other great things that she does on here, and if you like heady stuff like that, it's definitely an interesting podcast that you want to check out. Well, I guess that's it. 10 podcasts. And we can march right into the outro.
We're on that internet thingy at sherpollution.com.
A very special thanks to Brian Dunning of Skeptoid and the new movie that's out, the UFO movie they don't want you to see. But, we want you to see it, because it's going to be good. And it's going to be interesting, as was this conversation. Thank you so much, sir. And if you are enjoying this show, hey, you know what you could do? You know what you can do. Head on over to Apple Podcasts and give me a nice review. And if you let me know, you will be entered in a contest where you could possibly win podcast merchandise. La, 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 la. Another podcast merchandise song. I know. I've got millions of them. Millions. And if you're enjoying this show, you know where you can hear us too. On any of your favorite podcast apps, sherpollution.com, or even the Sherpollution YouTube page where the username is at Sherpollution5000. Bum, bum, bum. I don't know. I'm very musical today. I don't know. So I got my calendar messed up. I had said last week that Brendan Schexnayder was going to be this week's guest, but he's actually going to be next week's guest. So maybe you either want to check out the Skeptoid podcast or the Southern Gothic podcast. Or you can check out both of them, of course, if you've got a nice big podcast playlist. That's what this show is all about. We want you to hear great podcasts, and I get the opportunity to speak with great podcasters. So check that one out next week. It'll be some spooky Southern history. Ooh. Okay, Mr. Bruce, yes, you can bring my teddy bear over here. So until then, Rebels of the Sherpollution, I'll see you next time, and I will gladly say to you, Viva la Sherpolution.
Thanks for listening to Too Many Podcasts. Please disperse. You can go home now. I said you can go home now. Viva la Sherpolution. Viva la Sherpolution. Oh. Yo, come back now, you hear?
You know, Rebels, if you've been checking out some of my promotional ads on social media, you will be aware that I have been using a lot of AI programs to help me create ads. But you know what? There's a lot more uses for AI than just funny little videos. And I'd like to introduce one of our new sponsors, Podium. It is a leader in creating AI tools for podcasters. Now, let's say you've got a podcast, or maybe you're even thinking of doing a podcast. You're probably wondering, well, how can AI be integrated with your workflow? I'll tell you about Podium. As a podcaster, you know that writing show notes and creating chapters and transcribing episodes takes a lot of time, and it can cost you a lot of money too. But you know what? That's where Podium comes in. It's an AI tool designed specifically for creators and podcasters with the goal of making post-production tasks quick and easy. And in just a few minutes, Podium generates show notes, chapters, summaries, clips for social media, a full transcript, suggested episode titles, social media posts, and more. Whew, that's a lot of work for one little program. Your show notes are key to your podcast's success because it helps new listeners find your podcast and they'll know if it's a fit for them. You know, kind of like Too Many Podcasts. It also improves your SEO, that's your search engine optimization. Ooh, big phrase there. And overall accessibility. And with Podium, you can focus on creating a great podcast and let Podium's AI do the heavy lifting. But Podium isn't just for solo creators and podcasters. It's a game changer for editors, producers, marketers, agencies, and production studios. Teams that use Podiums are able to increase workloads, decrease turnaround times, and improve their quality. How does it work? Very easy. First, go to Podium's website, and you'll see that link that's right there in the show notes. You get 3 hours free just to try it. Pretty cool, huh? And using that link also supports this show as well. And you know what else happens? Because I'm a good guy. You use my link, you will get 50% off for your first month. So visit the site, upload an MP3 file, and download your files, and that's it. And if you need anything else, you can use Podium GPT to generate articles and any marketing copy you might need in seconds. Instant show notes, transcripts, chapters for your podcast or channel. This will level up that podcast. So check out Podium today.